Hello and welcome back to my studio. I'm Mark Heine, artist and author from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. This is video number 4 in my Elements of Painting video series. Uh, let's go straight to the video here, the slideshow I put together. Let's share my screen. And that, and where we left off was a little conversation about base texture. And I just wanted to point out that base texture is something that I put in every single painting that I'm doing. I learned early though that the heavier the base texture, the harder the image is to photograph. And I find it super important to take good copy stand work of your paintings before they leave the studio, because once it's gone, and you may never see it again. And that painting is a part of your life and your experience. If you don't have a good copy stand of it, um, you're going to regret it. And it's been something that I've been a big proponent of for a long time. I have a copy stand system set up in my studio that's taken years to perfect, starting with 4x5 transparencies and bump flash photography and all that stuff. But I have a system set up now where I can get good digital images now. I'll have a slideshow and a talk about that whole subject at another time. But it's super important to get good copy stand work of your artwork, especially if you want to go into reproductions and things. So one of the things that makes that difficult though is base texture. So if you're really heavy onto the texture, you can see how much that comes through in the photography. So that is a limiting factor. And so the base texture in most of my work is not this severe. I chose this piece because it's showing base texture, but it is normally not that heavy for me. So that's base texture, and the next element is ground color. So once I've put a layer of gesso with a palette knife over my canvas, I think this is about a 30 by 40 canvas, then I put a layer of red ground acrylic. And I use red because I'm doing mostly figurative work. There's multiple reasons why I use the red. I want to create an organic feel. So I use a red acrylic. I don't want to put it on thick because it clogs the texture of the canvas, which makes the paint application tricky. If you clog all the textures, nothing for nothing to hold the paint, and so you can quite easily wipe off underlying coats, underlying applications of paint if there's no texture there to hold it. So I put on a wash of water over top of the gessoed canvas, and then I take a kind of an ochre red color and apply it in very thin, almost a wash. So you can see there's some texture kind of showing through. Some of that texture picks it up in the canvas gesso texture underneath. But I want to create kind of an organic, leathery kind of feel. The reddish tone, no matter how opaque the paint is, the reddish tone seeps through the paint. And one of the problems that you try to avoid when you're painting is color isolation. That's like having one color over here and it doesn't appear anywhere else in the painting, and it looks odd. So if you can have a common theme of color running through the entire painting, that helps make a harmonious color palette. Another big one of having a mid-tone, like if you took a black and white photograph of this object here, this canvas, you'd have like a middle gray, number 5 gray kind of value. So what that does in terms of your mind, the painting is already there. You just need to add the shadows and the highlights. That's the way I like to look at it. And another part of this process of adding texture and ground in a kind of a very textural way is it's a cathartic process we all quite often get uh, white canvas fear of ruining a big canvas, right? You've got this new canvas that you just bought or made, and you're worried about ruining it, so you approach it in a timid way, uh, and that will ruin it if you approach it in a timid way. So making a mess of the canvas and then cleaning it up is kind of the way I think about it. And so we've got a number 5 value down there already. So anything that's highlight is going to be lighter than that mid-tone, and anything that's a shadow is going to be darker than that mid-tone. So you're adding the highlights above it and the shadows below it. So it establishes the mid-range value. And it adds a certain amount of intensity too, because it's red. But if it were gray, it would be the middle of the painting. And that also sets the painting into the canvas instead of sitting on top of. It's kind of a mental thing, but I think it's quite helpful. And then I draw over top with a white chalk pencil, easily wiped off, or I transfer my drawing down. If I do a drawing on paper, I'll transfer that down with a chalk transfer sheet, uh, uh, which is another process I'll get into another time. And then I tend to draw start with the dark colors. I start with the darks to establish my darkest values, and I try to start away from the focal point so that I can get the values established before I start working on the detail. If you go in and you work on the detail part first, and you get all that nicely painted in, and then when you paint the background and you realize that the values in your focal point are all wrong, and that's where all the work is, because that's where the concentration of detail is. So I do the outer edges and work my way towards the focal point. But anyway, ground color I think is important for a number of working reasons. So consider that. Consider what color you'd like to work with. Some people use pink. Some people use red. Some people use blue. You can use whatever you like, but I personally think it's important to think the ground color. So that's ground color. And crop, of course, crop makes a big difference in terms of composition. This particular one has quite a bit of negative space shapes. These shapes created by the space that the figure is not in become part of the design element. So crop is an important thing to consider if you're looking at working with a photographic material, reference material. So this is a little experiment I did. Again, this is part of that demonstration video that I did for showed in previous videos. So this is a photograph of my daughter in the pool in the backyard, and I've taken that and I've just kind of cropped. I've decided on the area that I want to crop to create the image that relates to the size of canvas I'm working with. So I've kind of done a thing here so you can see what I'm doing. So you don't necessarily, you play around with the crop. What I used to do sometimes is I'd have an image that I like, and on the computer, I just close my eyes, and with the cropping tool, I just go over it over and over and over, and do a bunch of different crops and a bunch of, save as 1, save as 2, save as 3 kind of thing. Come up with a variety of really random compositions and crops that you wouldn't necessarily think would work. And then after I've done that a whole bunch of times, then I'll stop and I'll open them all back up, and I'll kind of look at them and go, oh, that's kind of weird. No, that's kind of interesting. And that can take you in directions that you wouldn't necessarily think to go. And quite often it'll give you an idea and you go, oh, well, that's kind of cool. But what if I took that and I kind of tweaked it a bit this way or that way? So it can give you some interesting uh, um, compositions and crops that you wouldn't necessarily do intentionally. Just a fun thing to play with. So that's the composition I've chosen. Now here's the actual photograph now cropped, and you can see it's bigger in this file, but I flipped it over so I can have top left to bottom right again, top left light coming in, and and that was consideration for this particular work. Okay. Balance composition, and this is I've got a few other artists mixed in here for their various skills. Andrew Wyatt is I'm a big fan of, and this one can't remember what's her name's World, something's World. Anyway, I just like the balance of the composition in this image. So when you're working on your own thing, consider that. That's something to consider in advance when you're working on the initial design and you're moving the elements around. Think about a nice balance in terms of weight. These are good things to pre-consider. Balance composition is important. Emotional intent. That's something that a lot of people don't necessarily preconceive, but having a clear idea of what kind of emotion you're trying to portray in this image when you paint it is something that you can set in your mind, and it's something you can put to rest because you've considered it and you know kind of where you're going. I want it happy and carefree, or I want it sad, or I want it scary. This painting is called Melancholy, and it was very much painted to create a specific mood. So like the highlights, even the brightest highlights are quite blue. Uh, it was all done, and of course they're complementary to the orange coloring in the cheeks. And so yeah, the emotional intent of this painting was actually the focus of this painting. That's why I chose it for this example. Preconceive that. It's a good thing to just have a quick thought about. Focal point. Okay, obviously, focal point is one of the biggest parts of a painting. This particular painting, Labyrinth, actually won the Haynes Galleries Award at the 14th Art Salon in New York, and uh, got to show at the Meme in Museum of Modern Art in Barcelona, and had a show down in Nashville because of this painting. It's part of my Underwater Siren series. Clearly, the focal point is clearly this arm here. So I've made the mistake in the past. Sometimes I'm in a hurry. Sometimes I'm not clear-headed, and I don't establish my focal point in advance. So I don't know what my focal point is going to be before I start painting, and that's a mistake. It's primary to understand your light source and your focal point are huge things to know. Uh, and and uh, and so I don't let it evolve. I plan where the focal point is going to be, and I work towards that. It gives you a goal. So focal point is huge. And I've screwed up so many times where I didn't prepare the focal point, or I didn't preconceive the focal point, and then just get lost, not knowing where to go because I haven't worked it out. I haven't thought it in advance. So you don't have a map, you can't get there. So a lot of this stuff is pre-thinking. It's creating that map for how you get there when you're painting. So I did this again as part of that demo series that I did. So it's the pool in the backyard again. And I put this in because I've indicated where the primary focal point is, of course, but also in this particular one, I've indicated the secondary focal points. So I've got little points of interest distributed around, and again, it all becomes part of that from previous videos, that whole leading of the eye through the image to get back to the focal point, and keeping the viewer in the image and not flowing through it. Like with this one, when you come in from top left, come down to the focal point, and then you can go through the points of interest and some of these highlights and some of these cast shadows, and back down around into the focal point. And this shape, this curved shape here, is almost a barrier to keep the viewer's eye from flowing off the page. You really can't go past that because it's kind of a hard blocking edge to keep the viewer swirling in the painting. And in this particular one, I've also indicated reflected light, which is a subject we'll get onto in a little bit, but just because I've pointed it out here, I want to show it. So we've got reflected light, blue and green, coming from the water, and because the hair is wet, whatever you're working on, if it's a shiny surface, it's going to reflect more color. So wet hair is going to pick up more of the reflected color. Now you can't see it much here, but remember, these are elements of painting. So once you understand the elements, you can play with them. You can exaggerate them if you understand them, and you can take them beyond reality, and that makes a huge difference in the work. So we've got reflected blue light coming in from the bottom right here. We've got reflected light from the pink floaty device into the back, into the skin, and into the hair. So there's light reflecting all over the place in this painting. So anyway, this is supposed to be about secondary focal points, and I just planned out these focal points. And again, this is stuff that you do normally without verbalizing it, and you may do subconsciously, but it's important to understand that you're doing this stuff, because if you put it into words, then you can start to really understand how these things are happening and start to bend them and start to twist them and exaggerate them or minimize them to give you the kind of effects that you want. But you have to know what these elements are in order to manipulate them. They're tools for you to play with, and if you know how to work with them, you can create an image that comes out the way you want it to come out. So I think we're out of time. That's about 20 minutes for video number 4. Let me just get out of the share here. So thanks again for listening. Remember, these are all personal ideas that I've developed, and they may not agree. You may not agree with them, but I thought I'd share them and hope you get something from them. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video. Take care.